Hey everybody, and welcome back to another lecture with Coding with Roby. In this lecture, we're going to create a new API that can read a to-do based on a path parameter of a to-do ID passed along with the API. To do this, we want to create a new API. So I want to say @app.get, and as a parameter or URL, I'm going to say /to-do/to-do ID in brackets. And now as the function, I'm going to say async def read to do. And as the parameters, I'm going to say to do ID, which is of type int, which will match the path parameters. And then I'm going to create a new dependency of db, which is of type session, which depends on getDB. And now the first thing we're going to do is create a variable called toDoModel, which is going to be equal to db.query. And as the parameters, again, I'm going to type in models.todos, which represents the to-dos table. And now I'm going to say .filter. And .filter allows you to now filter your SQL command to now navigate the records within a table. So my .filter's parameters are going to be models.todos.id equals to-do ID. So the to-do ID of the path parameter needs to match the record of the todos.id within the table. I then want to say .first. .first just means after it finds an element, it'll return that element or record. And using .first helps that we don't have to now navigate the entire database. And now I want to say if toDoModel is not none. So we did return a record from the database, then we want to return that toDoModel. If not, we want to raise a new HTTP exception. So let's type in raise HTTP exception and make sure we import HTTP exception from FastAPI. With the status code of 404 in the detail item not found. Let's now save the file, and now let's open up our Swagger documentation and refresh our page. We can immediately see that we have a new to-do of to-do/to-do ID. We have a path parameter that's now required. So let's try it out and pass in a to-do ID of 1. If we execute this, we can see that it returns pick up eggs, go to the store with the ID of 1. If we change this to 2, we now see that grass is getting long, ID 2. And lastly, if we say 3, we can see feed the dog, he is getting hungry with an ID of 3. However, if we pass in like 6 and execute, we'll get our raise HTTP exception of to-do not found. Now, just for development's sake, let's create a new function for our HTTP exception. So right under this, I'm going to say def HTTP exception. And in this function, I'm going to say the exact same thing of raise HTTP exception, status code 404 with to-do not found. And now within our read to do functionality, I'm going to remove this HTTP exception and just call our function of HTTP exception. If we save our file and we switch back to our docs and we refresh, and just for a quick check, we can say try it out. We can type in 2, execute. We get the to do with the ID of 2. And if we type in 6 again and execute, we'll get to do not found. The reason we did this and created a new function was for reusability. I'm sure later on we're going to have other methods and APIs that are going to have to do some kind of search of the records for to-dos and trying to find if we have an ID that matches. And each time the ID doesn't match in the future, we can just call this HTTP exception instead of retyping it every single time. This wraps up this lecture on how to find a to-do by the primary key, and I will see you in the next video.